Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the December 2nd meeting of the Justice Resource Advisory Council. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I will start with the roll call. Jasmine Beach Ferrara, DK, present. Chief Deputy Blake.
Present, if you can hear me.
I can, thank you. We have a hybrid setup. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Pat Freeman. Present. Sylvia Clement. Danny Cohen. Judge Thornburg. Todd Williams. Sam Sneed.
Present.
Tiffany Hanacho.
Present.
Donna Roos.
Present.
Chief Zach. Dustin Dow.
Present.
Julia Horrocks.
Present.
Susan Avat. Rachel Nygaard.
Present.
Deborah Campbell.
Here.
Mayor Manheimer. Lori Anderson. Jay Hackett. And Julie Rysdale.
Present.
All right, and we have a quorum.
11.
All right, so first on the agenda is the consent agenda. You should have the December agenda in front of you, as well as the November minutes. So hopefully you all have had the opportunity to review those. Any suggested changes to the November minutes? Any discussion on that? What about the agenda? December agenda. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes. Up next is our standing item for Justice Systems Data Report. Dr. Lee Creighton will lead us in that discussion.
Now I need to share my screen on Zoom, right? Can't get it into this stuff. Get off the Zoom.
Is that-
I got booted off the Zoom. So I don't think the Zoom folks can see it. All right. Now, thank you. Still learning. Jeez, y'all. Okay. There you go. Next, two things. This work today. All right, so hopefully now everybody can see this. Make it bigger. All right. So today I am going to talk a little bit about, we thought since we had folks come in from UNC School of Government to talk a bit about, I think they're talking mostly about non-appearance, but they also have a really great tool that we've referred to in these meetings previously in some of the data presentations, the Measurements for Justice dashboard. We thought we would tie some of the data that you can glean from that to our local jail data. So today we're going to look at most charged offenses, specifically the top 20 most charged offenses in 2021. and how that has played out in the actual jail population. So what I did is I went in and actually pulled out the top 20 most charged offenses in Buncombe County from the Measuring Justice dashboard. And I did all offenses, and then I did felony offenses specifically. And the reason why I did felony offenses specifically is, if you've heard presentations in the past, the time, one of the things that we saw during COVID is a significant drop in bookings coming into the facility. That's mostly happened in our misdemeanors. The felonies have really stayed stable throughout the pandemic and time kind of following that initial lockdown period. So I thought we would look specifically at those felonies because we know that those entries into the jail really haven't changed like we've seen for misdemeanors. So these are the top 20 most charged offenses for 2021. And so what I did is I took a look at the bookings into the detention facility that had one of these charges listed on the booking. And then I said, well, I only want to look at charges where the process type was for a new charge and it was issued in 2021. I also only want to look at bookings where one of these charges is the most serious offense, so they're not in for more serious offenses. And then that the booking remained in custody after appearing before the magistrate. So meaning they were not released unsecured or under a written promise at that decision point. And so then we come up with 1,200, just shy of 1,300 bookings. And then you can see from the very top figure, these charges in 2021 accounted for over 13,000 charged offenses. Keep in mind, these numbers are very different. People are charged with multiple charges on bookings. And so that's why those numbers are going to be a bit different. Here you can see when those bookings entered into the facility. Not surprising, the vast majority of them entered in during 2021. But we do see some processes that were still being served even out until last month, it seems, on one person. Here are those demographics. So majority, 76% of these bookings were men, and the majority also too were white. But there is a overrepresentation in Black individuals in these bookings. The county is right under 6%. If the 2020 numbers are in my head correctly. This is around 16%. So overrepresentation there. Age breakouts, you can see that the bulk of folks are in their 30s. 36, I believe, is the average age for this this group. But you can see that folks are coming in. Even some of the oldest individuals that we see coming into the facility are coming out of these charges. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of look at some inequities. And so what I did is I took the adult population of Buncombe County and looked specifically at the Black and white population. And I want to say one of the reasons why we do that is because it's a numbers situation. We have so few Asian people, so few Native American people coming through the jail that when you put those numbers in, sometimes one person's experience can really skew things. The other thing I want to note is just recently in this calendar year, the ID Bureau began collecting more reliable data for ethnicity. And so that's still something that's ongoing and being built up. And most of these bookings are going to come in before that process was in place. So we actually don't have that data for this group of people. Obviously, that's something as that data continues to build, we will start to incorporate it into our analyses. So basically, I did a booking rate. So this is based off the adult population in Buncombe County. And then you can see when we look at the number of Black people that came into the facility and white people, what those rates translated to. So about 1.7% of the population, of the Black population in Buncombe County had a booking, the booking rate for the Black population was 1.7%, for the overall white population was 0.5%. What that translates to is that Black people were just over 3 times more likely to be booked than white people on these charges. I then broke it down by sex, and so Black women 2 times more likely than white women. Black men more than 3.5 times more likely than white men to be booked on these charges. So you can see again that disparity in terms of entries. Then we turn to average length of stay overall for these bookings. It was about 6 days. You can see at the very top, there's a difference between how long Black people are staying and how long white people are staying. Black people are staying in custody on average about 1.3 times more times longer. Black women are staying in custody about 2.7 times than white women, and Black men and white men are staying. There's a difference, but it's not that as big as the female population.
Excuse me.
Sure.
You gotta understand why, in terms of the length of stay, that probably is income. But the rate of booking, do you have any explanation as to why there's an inequity?
I think the answer to that is there's probably many
So give me one.
factors. I think that, ultimately, who's policed, how people are policed, right? And why people might be engaging in certain acts are all driven by deeply rooted social inequities and, ultimately a culture of white supremacy.
Yeah,
So,
you not gonna get that from me.
So I think these are what we're seeing. These numbers reflect deeply rooted issues in our communities.
so, and I apologize for this. So are you saying the booking is the amount of exposure that African Americans or Blacks have, that the propensity for them to be arrested? I thought bookings were different than actually being arrested.
So
Maybe
these bookings, so that is a really important kind of point. So when you're brought into a detention facility here in Buncombe County, you are in our jail system what we would call booked. There is an actual booking event created. You might not stay, right? So these numbers are reflective of people that are being brought in, and they are staying for some period of time because that magistrate is not making a decision at that point to release them on an unsecured or a written promise. They're gonna either have to make a bond at some point at that point or further down the line. That decision is not being made to unsecure them so being released without having to bring some type of financial resource to the table.
I have a
Does that
question.
make sense?
Yeah, and I think it was striking. So there's an arrest that happens and they come to the magistrate. For the purpose of this data, you're excluding people that were unsecured or released immediately. So these are people that were booked and actually stayed in custody after the magistrate's decision point.
I think what we would see though is these hold true if we expand it to people that were released. And that's also reflected when you look at sort of the disproportionality and charging rates on the Measuring for Justice dashboard. You see that those disparities exist at that point.
So I have one more question then, because your data showed a lot of traffic data too. Of course, those are like your top offenses, but we're also saying that these are majority of offenses, and people are being booked and staying in custody for these offenses.
Yes, and they're new charges, so these aren't OFAs or orders for arrest for any other reason. They are new criminal charges.
And these are only felonies.
These are all offenses. We're gonna get all of them. Okay. So these are all offenses on those top 20 most charged offenses.
So Lee, can you go back and remind us what those were? The top ranking one was expired registration.
Yeah, so you're gonna see like, so a lot are gonna be there's like that are actually like staying in jail are gonna be more of your like misdemeanor larceny, second degree trespassing, DWI, simple assault on female, resisting drug paraphernalia, some of those.
So as we go further, we'll get more information on those specifically, or we'll let you go.
Okay.
Question on this side, though. I thought I heard someone.
Well, I was gonna, and I think you kind of answered a little bit. Are you seeing on the arrest percentages are the same as your booking percentages? Meaning
So-
that if an officer goes on a call, is more likely to arrest and book a Black individual than a white individual?
Well, no, that's not what this, we're not able to answer that question. We're looking at through the lens of bookings. And so you have to keep in mind that a booking can have multiple arrests events tied to it, right? And each arrest event can have multiple charges tied to it. And so, but when we look at, and we've done some work around some decision point analysis previously, and what we see typically when we look at anyone that's brought to the detention facility and is booked in our system, whether they stay for any period of time or immediately released, there is a disproportionate representation of Black people coming into the jail.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of it, intercept
Yeah.
0.5, right? I mean, that's our first opportunity for diversion.
Right.
How is that working versus, I mean, this is what, 0.1 diversion, like, so when I break it down, it's like, where are the other opportunities for diversion before they get to this stage, which I think is a lot easier to divert earlier in the process than later in the process.
So Lee, how are you counting, like, the person is brought in on a single charge,
Yes.
but they come back later and add more charges? That's another arrest, but only one booking.
Right.
But it's one body. So are you counting bodies?
I'm counting bookings. So say for instance, I come in on, a misdemeanor larceny, right? And maybe 2 weeks later, I get charged with, some type of class I felony, right? Based off of how I'm doing that, that booking, I'm gonna be counted as a class I felony because I'm ranking the seriousness of charges based off of all of the charges on the book. Does that make sense?
Add it to the book. So that's why, like, in this data that you're doing, like, we're doing decision point analysis. They kind of each operate independently of another decision point. But as we talk about, like, the net widening and people impacted, the disparities change as people get deeper into the criminal justice system, from like first contact to sentencing and conviction and
Right.
probation and parole. It all look different.
I mean, so basically what we see, because we have disparity happening at the point of entry, right? And then we have disparity happening around length of stay. And we've talked about that in various places. What happens is then the overall disparity in the population increases. So it's a double impact. So there's disparity already at the beginning. There's more disparity in the middle, which results in the disparities that we have in the population. Does that make sense? Everybody?
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's complicated. I mean, folks are involved are at the jail for lots of reasons. So what I've tried to do in this analysis is really hone in on, was the top charge on the booking, of which there could be many charges on,
And many arrests?
and many arrests, was the top charge one of these 20? Was it for a new charge and not an order for arrest? Was it issued in 2021? And then were they released, or did they stay? Lots of conditions. All right. Felonies. Okay, so these were the top 20 felony charges. What that did, same conditions that we talked about in terms of what I'm counting, just shy of 1,000 bookings. That represented these 20 charges represented just over 1,600 of the top most charged offenses in Buncombe County in 2021 for felonies. And very similar chart to when these bookings were entered into the facility. The demographic breakdown is pretty similar from the from male, female, slightly higher percentage male. What you'll see is that blue bar representing Black individuals is bigger. So this is around 23% of those bookings. And then what you can also maybe see a little bit here, the average age for this group was 33, so slightly younger. And you might notice from the previous chart like this, the tail here is a little bit shorter. So more close to that younger group, 23 to I guess 33 to 37 is where the bulk of that ages. Same sort of relative rate index analysis here. You can see the disparity actually increases for these charges. So Black people were almost 5 times more likely to be booked on these felony offenses than white people. Black women were almost 3 times more likely to be booked than white women on these charges, and Black men were 5.5 times more likely to be booked than white men on these charges. Length of stay. You can see there's quite a bit, about almost 11-day difference there between the Black and white population, translating to Black people staying in custody an average of 1.3 times longer. This is a little bit of a, this one's different here for the female population, and I put a little note. When we start to really dig in and categorize these charges and look at these populations, the populations can get really small. So I just exercise some caution in kind of interpreting that and just understanding that, for example, there could have been a white female that stayed for a very long time that's skewing this number. The Black men were in custody an average of 1.4 times longer than white men. So similar to what we saw with overall offenses, disparity at the beginning, disparity in the jail in terms of length of stay, which then results in that higher percentage of the population being Black. And
I apologize for demonstrating my obvious
no, these are all excellent questions.
lack of knowledge about the judicial system, but whose decision is it to determine when someone gets booked? Who makes that decision?
Well, it's complicated, right?
Well, the officer makes the decision to bring them in.
Exactly.
The
That's
arresting
an arrest.
authority.
Right.
And then they appear before a judicial official, the magistrate. And correct me if I'm wrong, Meredith, but at some points he has discretion depending upon the charge. And some points not. He has to wait maybe till the next day to see a district court judge or superior court judge.
Yes, the magistrate determines if there's probable cause for the charge. The officer tells the facts of the case when they bring the individual in. The magistrate finds if there's probable cause or not. And then they would conduct a bond hearing at that time to determine if it's, written promise, unsecured, or a secured bond. Unless it's a DV case that they're brought in on a domestic violence charge, there's a hold of a no bond for up to 48 hours. So if there's, if they got arrested tonight, there would be 48 hours before we get to court on Monday. So then a magistrate would make that bond determination at 48 hours. If they were arrested last night, then they would be on the court docket today to go ahead and get a district court judge to make that determination.
And don't they have a grid to set the bond by?
There is the bond policy that they go by as a guide.
To answer your question.
Sorry, I know that was a lot.
I would like to add, though, that we have a pretty diverse group of magistrates. More so than ever before.
So is the decision made by the magistrate in terms of booking still financial, their ability to secure?
Well, they look at their record, and then the charge. So reviewing the facts of the case, what type of crime it is, and that individual's record.
I know in Wake County, the magistrate waits to get the full criminal history back before they make a decision. Our magistrates don't have that luxury to wait on that full criminal history, but in Wake County, I know they do.
We've talked about the public safety assessment that we do provide the judges, but gives that history. We've talked about providing it to the magistrates, but that comes with like system change. But they're already kind of looking at they're looking at some type of criminal history to make their determination. But of course, assessments come with their own inherent bias, right? So not saying that's the key or answer, but
And sadly, right now, the data they may be looking at may be inaccurate.
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
Because e-warrants and AOC, the whole expungement nightmare, those charges might not really be on the record.
just cause and effect. I'm just trying to dig a little deeper in terms of ultimate decision makers and what criteria, what is being used to make those numbers,
Right.
those outcomes be the way that they are.
Absolutely, and the answer is there's many, right? There's many points in the system where discretion exists. And but the combination, right, of those things really create some of these more startling numbers, right? And I mean, one of the things that, right now, our local jail population is a higher percent Black than I've seen it in the last 8 years that I've been looking at this data. And a lot of that is driven by, we've got felony, the impacts of felony offenses on that population more so than white people. From not necessarily raw numbers standpoint, but from that rate and from that.
Yeah, I just think a lot of this information, DK, would be very helpful for a criminal justice group working on reparations to have this kind of information. Because the intent of reparations really is about having generational impacts. And I think that this is a really, really good place to start.
I agree.
Thank you. I won't-
Yeah, no,
I won't
thank you for your
disturb any more
questions.
information.
It's these things are very complicated to really pull apart in the data. So I appreciate y'all's comments and questions because that helps me go back and look at things maybe a little bit differently.
Sure.
But yeah,
Thank you.
any other
When
questions?
you're pulling your data, are you using a standard bell curve and just throwing out your outliers? Or are you keeping all those
Keeping
outliers?
everything in, it's the population.
That's going to always skew us, right, around some of that factual data. I mean, is there any consideration that you would just drop your tails?
We could look at it. I mean, I think we've looked at it in the past, and what you see is sometimes those outliers, there's a bunch of outliers. So are then they really outliers? So the curve might be, in terms of length of stay, might be.
That'd move your bell curve down
Right.
towards those outliers, so.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And median length of stay is another way that we could probably look at this, and we have in the past.
You should take out the when it charged with murder. I think that would really change that dramatically.
Yeah.
If you're talking about outliers, that all it takes are
Right.
3 women.
Yeah.
That sat in jail for 2 years.
Yeah.
so maybe it's not taking them out, but parsing them out differently, but still tell the story
Right.
of like, this is the outlier. And this is data from the outlier about why somebody's sitting there being
Right.
pretrial charged. And those considerations.
Yeah. That's it. Anything else?
Well, I'll just say that this is why we have this as a standing item. We want to have these kind of conversations. Look at the data. Dr. Craven will show us the data and he'll, relative rate index and all that great, beautiful stuff. But then the people around this table have the in court or out of court experience to be able to bring the stories together. And then Lee can go back and look at the data differently. And we'll look at it in different ways to come up with the why that City Manager Campbell is talking about. So
Yeah, and I
come up with the why and how to what
To
we can do
advance
differently in the
policy,
system
right, exactly.
to impact these numbers, so.
And, we're working with the data that we have. And, I think that there's a lot of unknowns from a data perspective about court case processing and how certain things play out. That's a whole part of this process that we locally don't have insights into. And so we can point to things a lot of times with jail data, but we can't always tell them why.
Lee, is there any way to even parse some of that out by individuals that, I know you're doing the substance abuse mental health screenings on the front end to sort of pull some data in the future around what percentage of those individuals that are being booked have a co-occurring mental health or a substance abuse condition to them?
So we've tried to do that in a variety of ways in the past, and I'm not quite sure what the process is right now in the jail in terms of where those data are being entered into. If they're not entered into our local jail management system, it becomes pretty difficult for us to get that access. So it's kind of a question of who's collecting that data. Is it the medical provider? Is it the jail itself? Where is that data getting entered? But yeah, we've tried to look at things like that in the past, but we have to rely on what's ever in the
For the conversation to revisit that, because it was a significant population.
I'm just trying to think from our angles too, as we're seeing a significant amount of increase in mental health substance abuse across the county being used, but we're seeing a downward curve in engagement rates in the Black population in those services. And so we got higher acuity going off the chart, and we got lower access on our Black communities. And so that could be a precipitating factor in some of that as well, as we're not getting resources and treatment options into those communities as well. So that'd just be helpful.
I know at one point, Lee, they were doing it via a questionnaire when they were doing the classification.
Yeah.
But I don't know where that stands currently. We might check that.
Yeah, I know there is some type of screening being done, but the question is just who's doing it and where it's entered.
So that's an opportunity.
All right, follow up. And I see Major Banks and Chief.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Thank you. Thanks. So new business, as you all know, most of the seats on this council are those by position or office or department, but we have 2 community seats. Julia currently sits in one and Jay in the other. The current seat that Jay is in, the term has expired. So typically what we'll do is, if it was vacant altogether, we have interviews and then we make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on who to appoint. And so the question today is, for this expired term, do we want to recommend to the Board of Commissioners to reappoint the current community representative, or the other option, the will of this group to open it up and go through a process? So I wanted to bring that to you all, that you know that we do need to make a decision on what we will recommend going forward. And I'll entertain a motion or discussion or motion either way.
This is the first term.
Yes.
For the 2 years, so, okay.
So we just added this, I guess, when we did our bylaws 2 years ago. And so this would be the first expiration term that we had to consider.
Is he interested in continuing?
He has not, is he interested? Okay.
Yeah, he's confirmed he's interested.
All right,
He
good.
was sick today.
I was gonna say I was hoping he was here today. He's not feeling well, so, but he's interested. Sounds like he is interested in continuing, so.
Do we know if there are any other people interested in joining?
Well, we haven't opened
Oh, we
it.
have, since it's not.
We haven't opened it. And I can say when we opened it the last time, we didn't get more than 6 or 7 that were interested at that time.
I think since it's new, I move that we should reappoint Jay. It's first time of us doing community representation, and it took us 2 years of storming and norming getting to this point where we are now. And we're in a pandemic, so I move to reappoint Jay for the next term.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, I can let Jay know. And Jay was so, I mean, he's so engaging on this. He's even the vice chair, right? He came right in and
Who else
said.
would be vice chair, right?
And you're working closely with me is a delight. All right. All right, so next we have North Carolina Court Appearance Project. We have Ethan Rex here with us from the UNC School of Government to share some information with us. So I'll turn it over to Ethan.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Ethan Rex, and I work as a project manager for the Criminal Justice Innovation Lab at the School of Government. I also have with me Hannah Turner. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Hannah. I'm also a project manager at the Criminal Justice Innovation Lab. Ethan and I work together on the court appearance project, and he's going to tell you about sort of the work that's been done in that project and how that might apply to Buncombe County and some of the work that we're doing moving forward as well.
Definitely. Yeah. So a brief background on the lab for those who may not be familiar. The lab helps stakeholders at every level achieve their goals of keeping communities safe while treating everybody equally and using resources wisely. Our work spans 3 areas. We have foundational research to spotlight challenges and opportunities, pilot projects to help stakeholders test and measure ideas, and roadmaps to reform to get stakeholders up and running on the things that they want to get done. So this project touches a little bit on all 3. And so I'm delighted to get the opportunity to discuss court appearance with you because we know it's a really important subject. Issues with court appearance can contribute to system-wide inefficiencies and case backlogs, can inconvenience victims and witnesses, and can also result in arrest, time spent in jail, and a suspended license for the person charged. In other words, it's an important issue with far-reaching impacts to the criminal justice system. We also have or know of a sizable set of solutions to address these issues and mitigate their consequences so that we can improve public safety, promote a fair and effective system while ensuring opportunity for prosperity for everyone. So I'll share my screen quickly. I've organized our discussion around 2 broad topics. First is examining the impact of court appearance. And then I'll share with you a menu of policies developed by your colleagues in New Hanover, Orange, and Robeson counties in the court appearance project that Hannah mentioned. So the court appearance project was a stakeholder-driven project with support from the lab and Pew Charitable Trusts that included a broad group of court system stakeholders. So if you hear me referring to county teams or to phase 1, that's who I'm referring to. And I just want to clarify, because I can't really see, but can everybody see my the presentation on the Zoom?
Yes.
Great. Always like to double check to make sure that everything's working. So first, let's dig a bit into why court appearance is an important issue. And to do that, I'll help look at some data to understand the scale and consequences of missed appearances. And as I can tell from our robust discussion already, it sounds like you all are familiar with talking about the data for Buncombe. And I was glad to hear the shout out for the Measuring Justice dashboard from Lee. All of the data that I'll be using today comes from that dashboard as well. So I think Hannah will link to that in the chat if you don't mind, Hannah. And the dashboard, as you all may be well aware, is an online tool that you can use to look at different criminal justice metrics, both statewide, but also county by county. So when we look at non-appearance rates, and we're looking at the time period of 2018 to 2021, we see that about 1 in 12 criminal incidents, so that's criminal cases that happen on the same day in the same county. And we see that about 1 in 12 criminal incidents in Buncombe had at least 1 missed court appearance. So let's recognize something up top. Most people make it to court. And if we compare your rate to the statewide rate, it's a little bit lower. But when we look at the count, we see that in Buncombe, you're seeing about 2,000 missed hearings a year. And so what happens when a person doesn't appear? Well, we know for one, the court date will be rescheduled. And this impacts victims and witnesses who came to court that day, as well as the offices of the court, like judges, attorneys, clerks. And we know if the case requires the state crime lab, that could be a significant delay as well. So a missed appearance delays proceedings, which can contribute to system-wide inefficiencies and case backlogs that are already exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And if the non-appearance was for a motor vehicle offense, a person's driver's license may be revoked. And without a valid driver's license, people may face additional barriers to work, to fulfilling their family obligations, or to appearing in court in the future. And the process to reinstate a license costs money and time that, depending on the barriers that led someone to miss court in the first place, may already be stretched then. And when a missed appearance happens, a judge may decide to issue an order for arrest. And that uses additional resources in the clerk's office to process the OFA, the order for arrest, as well as for law enforcement to make the arrest. And that's hours of officer time processing arrest when they may rather want to be ensuring public safety or policing violent crime. And we of course know that incarceration of any length can result in collateral consequences for an individual, like job loss or housing instability. And it's also extremely costly to the county and to taxpayers. So with that in mind, let's jump to our next data point. And this table shows the most common underlying offense for a missed appearance initiated in 2018 to 2021. And you can see this is the top 5. 4 out of the 5 are what we would call administrative traffic offenses. There's one moving traffic offense or moving violation, speeding, at 5th. And we have the top 5 here. If you extend that list out, you wouldn't see a felony until 21st on the list. So when we look at the world of non-appearances, much like criminal charging in general, we see that it's largely a misdemeanor and a misdemeanor traffic system. And this data is pretty consistent with what we see with statewide data as well, that largely most non-appearances are for what we would call administrative traffic misdemeanors. Now, there's something with the data that I wanted to bring up for discussion today, and I'd like to unpack this slide here. And what you're looking at are the number of non-appearances by the incident's initiation year, so when a case was initiated for the county. And you can see that there is a drop occurring for criminal incidents initiated in 2020. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind whenever you look at 2020 is COVID. And we know that statewide charging dropped and court generally slowed down as well. Of course, I imagine in Buncombe, you also had some changes to court practices, which could impact the numbers that we're seeing. And so to get the full context, we wanted to look at the non-appearance rate for these offenses or for these incidents. And that would account for any reductions in overall, like charging drops overall. And it would also allow us to compare to the statewide rate. And so this graph shows non-appearance rates for the state, which is that blue line up top, and for Buncombe County, that green line at the bottom, for incidents initiated 2019 through 2020. And you can see this dashed line here is when the statewide stay-at-home order was issued. And you can see that your non-appearance rate dropped for incidents starting after November 2019 and remained low throughout the year. And that's compared to the statewide non-appearance rate, which dropped not as drastically and then bumped back up. And so I wanted to open up to the group for a little bit and ask if you had any thoughts about what might explain this drop, if there was any policy changes or any changes to court practice that may explain this drop that we're seeing. Any thoughts?
Go, Meredith.
And during COVID, we were continuing cases that were out of custody and handling the custody matters. So folks out of custody weren't getting failures to appear. They were just getting continued until things started back.
I see. So
I don't even know if they were marked present or not present. See, our court minutes may have reflected that they were not present, but they were given a new court date. But of course, there wasn't an official non-appearance as you're describing it, with some kind of additional order for arrest.
right, and that's the important. That's one of the things that we were thinking of when we were looking at this data is it's important to think about what this number is and what this measures, right? And this is this data only looks at failure to appear entries in the ACES court record. So if there's a change in practice that and how those are recorded, that could show up in the data as a reduction in non-appearance rates. Also, here's like what I'm hearing from somebody, and I'm sorry, I can't really see anybody, so I apologize for not knowing who is saying that there was a continuance. So basically, people were not being required to come to court or to appear in court, which was, of course, less opportunity to miss court.
Yes, that's correct. I'm Meredith Presley from the DA's office.
Gotcha. Good to meet you. Any other thoughts about what may have changed around then that could have impacted court appearance?
Many lights going on.
Ethan, I have a question.
Yeah. That's
Sure.
right. Go
Can
ahead.
I ask just a question about the data? When you count a non-appearance, does it count on a case? There could be multiple non-appearances. Are you counting one non-appearance or all the potential? Like if the case had more than one non-appearance, are you counting that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And was that Lee who was asking that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a good question. And the answer is that it's a binary, right? So it is whether or not an incident had a non-appearance or not. The other thing to note that a little, I wouldn't call it a caveat, but just something to consider with this data as well, is that these are for cases, it's not when the non-appearance was, the data don't allow for that sort of discretion. It's just for the case initiation year. So for example, we see that drop happen in January of 2020. Say Ethan Rex has a criminal incident in Buncombe County in January 2020. My case is delayed. In 2021, I failed to appear on a hearing when that goes back on the docket. That would show up in this data there as well. So if court is started to resume and you're working through that backlog, we would expect those numbers to rise as we get, sort of that new batch of data for these cases. So that's a little bit of a nuance there with the data, but what I'm hearing from folks is that largely the expectation is that court, like elsewhere, slowed down. There was a lot of continuances, and also that there may have been some changes to record keeping practices that would explain why we're not seeing that entered as a formal FTA in the data. Is that sort of a good summation of what y'all's thoughts are?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
There's yes in the room. Can you hear?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for being willing to share the thoughts. We can sort of move forward from there. I guess I would like to open it up if there was any broader questions, because we talked a lot about the data. If there was any questions that anybody had about the data, or if there's anything that stuck out to y'all.
Looks like none.
Excellent. So like I mentioned at the top, there are a sizable set of solutions that your colleagues in New Hanover, Orange, and Robson developed to address issues related to non-appearance. And those solutions largely fall into two buckets. First is increasing court appearance so that things run smoothly and fairly from the get-go. And the second bucket is improving responses to missed appearance in the most effective and efficient way when they do happen. And so this is a table, it's a big, scary table that summarizes the solutions your colleagues developed for increasing court appearance. And I know that's a lot to take in from one slide, so I'll walk through some of these with y'all. The first thing that I want to talk about is improving text message reminders. So everyone on the project teams recognize the importance of reminders, and that's because studies have consistently found that court date reminder notifications are effective at increasing court appearance. We also know that the Administrative Office of the Courts operates a text message reminder system that anybody can sign up for. However, when the teams looked at the numbers, they saw that it's underutilized. When we looked at the numbers for Buncombe, we saw that only 800 people have been enrolled here total since the system began in 2018. And so seeing that kind of data, your colleagues focused on signing people up for the AOC court reminder system. And one example are posters in the courthouse or on public transportation, an example of which you can see here, as well as palm cards, which I'll talk about in a second. And so I'd like to highlight a couple of things here from the research. The first is in this bottom right corner, you see the description of consequences. And this clarifies expectations for people and conveys the importance of making it to court. And they added that because research reviewed by the teams said that this had an impact in increasing court appearance. And the data also showed that younger people are more likely to have a missed appearance than older people. And because we know that young people use QR codes and more likely to respond to things better on their phone, stakeholders decided to include a QR code as an option on the poster. So a person could scan this with their phone and would take them to the website where an individual could sign up for a text or email reminder. Now, I'll note when we look at your data for Buncombe that the younger folks compared to the statewide rate, that was less likely. So younger folks are about the same as older folks to have a missed appearance. But we know that QR codes can be convenient for individuals and can be also something that they sign up for at that moment. So it may be something that if you were to include, that you would consider including the QR code as well. So I mentioned palm cards, right? And these are easy to read business cards that direct people to sign up for the court reminder system. But they also convey key information about court services, like the courthouse location or transportation resources. And the idea is that these cards can be distributed by law enforcement when they issue a citation, or by court staff when they discuss an upcoming court date with a defendant, or by jail staff when a person leaves jail. Basically anywhere where you're talking about an upcoming court date with an individual, you can hand them the card and say, hey, this is all the information that you need to get to court. And so here's an example that the team from Robison developed. And you can see many ideas are duplicated from the poster. You have the QR code for the young people. And you also have the description of the consequences on the front side, just to orient everybody. This is, again, a business size card. This would be the front on one end and the back on the other. And you can also see additional information. So you have the court locations section. In Robeson County, they actually have outlying court. So there's a couple of different court locations for individuals. They're considering putting all of those locations on that section. Or you can have your phone number or the website. If there's specific services that you highlight on Buncombe County's website, you can put that there. And you also see that there's an opportunity to direct folks to address their case online via the nccourts.gov website. That may be an opportunity for individuals to utilize that service as well. And so the AOC has indicated an interest to us that jurisdictions would be able to use their print shop to get these made, not just the counties that we worked with, but any county. And so we're exploring the logistics of that with them now. If you're interested, we can be sure to keep you in the loop as those conversations continue. And maybe I can connect with somebody afterwards if that is of interest, and we'll be sure to keep you in the loop. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is transportation support. And so in Orange County, what they do is they have a local bail fund that raised enough money to allow individuals to use rideshare apps to help secure transportation to court, something like Lyft or Uber. And of course, we know that not every community has this resource, but they still have challenges with transportation. So for example, when we were working with Robeson County, they mentioned that the county's large and rural area made getting to court a particular challenge. And they reported that a lot of folks were unable to drive because of a suspended license, partially because of unpaid court costs and traffic cases. And so they knew that a transportation solution had to be both accessible, but it also had to be affordable. And in their case, in Robeson County, there's a program called SEATS, the Southeast Area Transit System, that offers transportation for services for folks in the county for $2 a ride. It was initially conceptualized as a way to get individuals to medical appointments, but they talked with them and SEATS said, yeah, we'd be more than happy to be able to utilize that service to assist folks with getting to court too. So that just meant that the individuals in Robeson had to spread the word about the program. And they plan to do that with pamphlets at the courthouse. And so if transportation is a solution that you're interested in, you may consider other opportunities that the county is already doing to link individuals to transportation and seeing if that can be an additional resource that you can provide to folks. So next up on this list, you can implement block scheduling for certain court sessions. So Orange County is doing this for administrative sessions in their Superior Court. And instead of doing basically a morning or an afternoon calendar call style, the blocks are shorter and set up in a shared calendar. The idea there is that narrower windows of required appearance make it easier to attend court. So for example, if a person needs to coordinate childcare or take off work, it's easier to take an hour and a half off as opposed to all morning or all afternoon. You can also formalize or expand options for virtual court. We know that virtual proceedings can remove or can mitigate barriers to attending court. And it could be either a standalone docket like Orange County does, or it could be integrated with in-person cases. That's another option to reduce those barriers to appearance. So I threw a lot at you, and I know in the interest of time, I want to hit the pause button, see if there are any questions we have before talking about the next bucket of policy solutions. Any questions that anybody has about any of these solutions we talked about thus far?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Regarding the Orange County bail fund you alluded to, do you know if that's administered, or do you know who administers that and funds that?
I am not sure. I think that's done with their criminal justice resource department, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Hannah, do you happen to know?
I don't, though I don't think it's not something that like the county has funded itself. It's, you know, external, it's an external group of some sort there where people have raised money that the county is essentially now able to use through the criminal justice resource department. But I'm not sure exactly which groups are involved or how, or if that money is sort of something that could potentially come to an end at some point. So I'm not sure about that.
We can certainly find that answer out for you though.
Yeah, we can.
Thanks. I'm Jasmine Beachfire from County Commission, by the way. Thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that we do have the little slips with the QR code to sign up for the text message reminders in the courtrooms. So those are available in our courtrooms already for folks to sign up.
And we use another system that's been developed by the city. That I think the QR code is attached to a different system than the AOC system. We think our system is superior. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
It probably is. It probably is.
I mean, that's not, you know, we've definitely heard that from other folks too. I know that a couple of public defenders offices have used what's called UpTrust. It's a software system that they can use. And I think the appeal there was, you know, from what we heard from folks, we can make custom reminders. We can have text message via a computer to somebody's phone. It's a lot more customization, and we can tailor fit it to our specific needs. So it's exciting to hear that that's something that y'all are doing here in Buncombe and in the city as well.
Yeah, I know that New Hanover and Robinson were UpTrust clients. Was Orange too? I know that UpTrust, was Orange with UpTrust too? Orange and Chatham or not?
Orange is exploring that. I don't know the answer of where that has resulted. When we had talked to them in the first phase of work, they had indicated an interest, and I can't quite remember if or know rather where that discussion ended up.
Have you talked to Wilmington or New Hanover and Robinson about their experience with UpTrust?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Jennifer Harjo's reported that their office really enjoys, likes the customization of UpTrust. They also like being able to not only send sort of automatic reminders, but being able to send text notifications as well to individuals without having to ask public defenders to use their personal devices, their personal phones to text people. So I know there's a broad base of appeal for a couple of different reasons. And I think they found that useful for the clients that they have. Of course, one of the limitations with UpTrust, right, is that it's only for the people with public defender clients, at least in that case. So there's a little bit of, you know, I think there's still interest in getting reminders for everybody as well. But, you know, Jennifer's talked about their experience with UpTrust, and it's been a positive one from what I've heard from her.
Public defender in New Hanover.
Yes, sorry.
This is Pat Freeman from the ID Bureau. We're getting ready to roll out where when a defendant comes in to be booked, we're going to ask them, do you want to participate in a text messaging program to be reminded of your court date. And that will be fed out to the third party. It'll share their mobile phone number with their permission. And just as soon as we get the green light, my group's ready to start asking that question of all defendants coming in.
And just for point of clarification, it's code Asheville,
Code for
code for Asheville that we're working with.
Is there some hesitation on that if someone thinks they give their phone number, that they're gonna be able to be tracked through GPS through that phone number? Because I know that would be a concern of me if I was in the system that, hey, now you're gonna have my phone number, potentially can track me. How is that addressed or discussed?
I think for the QR code, you're signing up voluntarily and there's a disclosure statement, but I think that's what Pat was working with legal.
We've got a disclosure statement that we're gonna read to them and have posted back in the intake area in various parts of the jail where, you know, it's totally voluntary on their part, and it's a third party volunteer group that's doing it, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's helpful to say. That's not law enforcement that has all
No,
the
it's-
information. It's a
yeah.
third party.
And we had legal advice write that statement.
We are we're pushing a lot of court notifications, pretrial does it. We haven't explored like transportation. I don't know if that's a need, but there are counties who are rolling out transportation to courts. And I don't know if those who work in court every day hear that as a reason why. I don't know if you guys hear that, Sam, in your.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Transportation's an issue.
All right, Ethan, you can go to your next bucket.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for the lively discussion. It sounds like y'all are recognizing or have that interest in court date reminder notifications as well. And yeah, I think a lot of the research indicates that that's really helpful for increasing court appearance. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the next set of policies that I'll talk about improve responses to a missed court appearance. And, issuing an order for arrest for a failure to appear can expend a lot of resources for law enforcement, court staff, jails. We know, of course, that an arrest and time spent in jail can have significant consequences for defendants. And that's, somebody who may have missed court because they forgot or have been confused about their case or were unable to get time off of work or a ride to court. And so knowing this, your colleagues in other counties wanted to make sure that orders for arrest were issued only when it made sense. To be clear, they also recognize that sometimes it does make sense, but having that thoughtful investigation about what solutions can we do to develop to understand that and to really only use this when it's an appropriate tool, is something that they wanted to do. And so you see here, this table, which summarizes the solutions that your colleagues developed for improving responses to non-appearance. So one solution is to allow ample opportunity to resolve missed appearances. For example, in Orange County, they use a strike order docket. And that's a recurring docket where individuals who have missed court can appear and address their non-appearance. And if there's an acceptable reason for the absence, the non-appearance is struck and individuals can avoid being arrested. Robinson does something similar, but instead of a specific docket, people can come into the clerk's office and take care of that there. You can also issue or utilize a bench card to reduce unnecessary orders for arrest. So for those who may not be familiar, a bench card is a structured decision-making tool that judges use to help determine whether to issue an order for arrest while also ensuring judicial discretion. And so here's an example from Orange County of what a bench card would look like. And as you can see, it's divided into steps so that judges can structure and record their thinking on any given case clearly. So in this example, if a person is charged with a misdemeanor and doesn't have a previous missed appearance, the bench card would recommend resetting the court date without issuing an order for arrest. Now, when the judge decides to issue an order for arrest, the card recommends that the judge set conditions in the order for arrest. And doing this ensures that the judges will set conditions based on an individualized determination of the case and the circumstances of the defendant's non-appearance. So next, you could also implement grace periods before issuing an order for arrest. And so for this, judges would indicate to the clerk whether to issue the OFA, the order for arrest, immediately or to hold for a certain amount of time, for example, 2 business days, to allow a person a window of time to rectify the non-appearance. So like the strike order docket, this is meant for the person who would have otherwise appeared in court, but for some extenuating circumstance, either work, transportation, childcare, or another emergency. And of course, you could also offer driver's license restoration support. So a suspended license can be a barrier not just to future court appearances, but also to employment, family responsibilities, and long-term stability. And we see that often old fines and fees are the reason preventing a person reinstating their license. And so the project teams developed a solution where the DA's office and the court would periodically review cases with outstanding fines and outstanding fees that are preventing people from getting their driver's license restored. And so they'd waive fines and fees that are past a certain age and offer no concern to public safety. And additionally, you could explore implementing a process for assessing ability to pay before fines and fees are imposed to avoid licensing issues down the line. So I know I've certainly gone over time, and I thank you for your patience, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions or any discussion that you all had on these solutions. Any thoughts?
Anybody want to share? I know there's some discussions around driver's license and potentially doing more in Buncombe County around the work there, but anybody else want to share or have any questions?
No, I did do a driver's license restoration mass motion order, so it was about 800 some folks that got their old court costs and fines stricken. I think I finished it early last year, I believe it was, or last summer. I can't recall when exactly. It was a long project, but we're certainly willing to help people strike FTAs, and they're calling and coming into the office, pretty much every single day, and ask the judges to strike the failures to appear and get their case reset.
Sam's nodding.
Oh yeah, we've been doing this for decades. I mean, the DA's office has always been a willing partner, particularly obviously with DWIs, it's very different. But any other kind of failure to appear, they're very easy to work with.
All right, thank you so much, Hannah and Ethan. I think it's always good to see what our neighbors across the state, also across the nation, are doing. Communities are unique, but we oftentimes have some of the same issues. We just figure out what works for our communities and try to evaluate and move those things forward. So we appreciate y'all's time.
Yes, certainly. And thank you so much for giving us the time. If there's, any follow-up or any questions or anything that we can do to be helpful for you or keep you all in the loop on the work that we're doing, or of course, if you'd like to share the work that y'all are doing, we'd be more than happy to continue that conversation. So I'll be sure to make sure that my email goes out to everybody so that we can continue that conversation if there's interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have jam-packed agenda today, which is always good in my opinion. One item we have left before we go to announcements is opioid settlement planning. And so Victoria Riker is going to give us a brief update on that.
Yeah, and I think just being cognizant of time, I want to maybe touch on more primarily like questions from you all, or letting you all know just where we are at in our planning phase. And so Natalie, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. We will share this information with you all as the handouts. This again are the strategies we're able to fund, and we'll go to the next slide. This is just a visual of the amount of dollars we are working with. We did set aside some money for this fiscal year to fill some funding gaps. As you see, that means any dollars we're receiving this year rolls over for next year. And again, those dollars can continue to roll over. Let's go to the next slide. These were the programs that we are funding this fiscal year. So two current programs that are within the county that had funding cliffs. We were also able to go ahead and look at opportunities to expand medications for opioid use disorder and trying to create a more easier access for those that are uninsured. We also noticed in the community there was a reduced or an increased need running it through funds. And so we wanted to increase naloxone distribution. And so health promotions is actually been working to try to use a community-led approach. And we'll be meeting with various stakeholders to kind of create a plan on how can we continue to distribute on the community level and make sure we're being equitable. And then we have some dollars around collaborative strategic planning, which is creating some of our outreach activities, potentially using community liaisons, those that are trusted in the community. And we do have a request for proposal for a recovery housing advisor. We had a pre-proposal meeting and there was a good participation there and some good questions. So excited to see how we will learn how we can use our dollars to address recovery housing. We know that's an important need in our community for people in engaging in treatment and maintaining recovery. We'll go to the next slide. And so right now, this is kind of a visual of our planning process. I'll look at our vision statement, but there's opportunities. So if anyone is interested in being part of any of our work groups, we have community engagement that will be ongoing. And then we're continuing to work through some root cause analysis and moving into goals and strategies. And then we're starting out our budget and implementation. We just had a launch meeting and then monitoring and evaluation. Let's go to the next slide. This is our vision statement that was written by the steering committee on how we would like to see our community look through effective use of our settlement funds. I'll let you all read that. We can go to the next slide. Ooh, oh, nice. And that next slide was our key indicators. And so one, as you'll see in there, there's some big buckets, right? Overdose deaths, emergency department visits, families involved in CPS. And then there's also some criminal justice system involvement. We are moving into our measurement phase. And again, we may not be able to have a discussion, but if anyone has thoughts and what are some maybe measurements in terms of the criminal justice system involvement and how we can see if the funds are making a difference. And then I also want to note we've identified social determinants of health. This also needs to kind of get fine-tuned and identifying those measures. But it was an important aspect because we know that the social determinants of health really affect, and I think even this conversation here with criminal justice involvement is that when we address these, hopefully people can get that right treatment and get the support that they need, and hopefully even looking at how can we prevent substance use and misuse and dependency. And then, so we're in our community outreach efforts. We actually just finalized our public input page for our general public. So within this slides, I would like for you all to even provide your input, but also looking at continuing to find ways on how we can spread the word. I did reach out to the clerk of court to see how can we put information out in the courthouse for people to apply, but also wanting to be targeted about folks in active use and or treatment. So we're working with our harm reduction providers and creating strategies that they can kind of provide that survey for these folks, as well as ADAC, trying to get creative on how we can use that. And so I am curious if you all have any thoughts on how we could, one, opportunities to get general public input, as well as folks that are in active use and or treatment. I know we're also going to be working with the treatment courts and doing something with them to survey and doing some listening sessions based on the results of those surveys. So I wonder if there's any burning ideas or thoughts. We'd rather hear something 5 times than miss it. But anything that's—
The thing I thought is with the treatment courts is can any of those funds be used to earmark like treatment beds so there's not as long of a wait list to get those individuals into treatment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a huge theme that we're hearing, and even meeting with the district attorney of that, you know, how do we help get people in? And I think even outside of criminal justice, a lot of our first responders, our post-overdose response team is just saying when people are ready to get into treatment, we need to get them somewhere. And even if we can find treatment in a week, we can't find them when the placement is available. And so that's definitely a theme that's coming up, is where can we provide support for an individual in that interim, and also getting them into that treatment quickly. And we'll go to the next slide. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, yes, that's it. So when we email out, we have our public feedback survey. Please reach out to us if you kind of have any ideas. You're talking with someone. I know I've reached out to Asheville City Cape and going to work with them to just kind of spread that out through those words. Would love with the public defender, just any ideas. So I'll talk with Madeline of just maybe ways that we can target individuals. I'm curious if the ID Bureau has any thoughts. Again, it might be just one more thing and too complicated, but if you had any thoughts, would be happy to even get with Andy if you thought that would be best. But again, we wanted to give you all at least feedback where we are in that process and those areas that we're looking for some feedback. And so please reach out.
Oh gosh, you did good. You did great. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, but I will say that Buncombe County has done a lot even before we got this settlements. But what is impressive for me in our community is that we didn't assume we had all the answers, and there was still opportunity to engage the community more. You know, there are folks that we know that don't normally come to the table and share their input. And so we're reaching out and trying to make sure we get as much information as possible to make sure the solutions that we move forward to the Board of Commissioners to consider are those that really help support the most impact, right? So, Commissioner, I don't know if you want to add anything that's so supportive.
Just a lot of
and leading.
appreciation for the work that has been done by this team and staff. And, you know, I think just to share, I think Buncombe continues to in many ways be a pace setter within the state around this work in particular. A lot of other communities kind of looking at lessons learned. And regarding the settlement funding as a whole, I know there continues to be interest in whether there's sort of regional or county consortium level responses that might be opportunities moving forward, particularly around things like treatment facilities where some, especially smaller counties, but even some larger counties, the lift of a big capital project and operational project like that is quite heavy. But if you get a consortium of counties coming together, there's some interesting opportunities there. So I think Dogwood in particular has been one of the philanthropic partners at the table throughout this process, trying to think about what kind of opportunities exist to sort of jumpstart and then support regional level planning. So just previewing that some of those opportunities may be on the horizon. And I'll just put in another little plug that community, as many folks may know, the community paramedic program is in the process of launching a new pilot outreach program that will focus specifically on kind of building on work around overdose response, but working on crisis mental health services, helping to get folks into code purple shelters. A lot of the related social determinants issues that we know often go hand in hand with what's happening here. That launches any day. I'm doing right along next week. So
This one was that community health workers. So that's
so that's an exciting kind of new piece of work that's rolling out and has 2 years of ARPA funding behind it to help it get started.
All right, do we have any public comment? None? Okay, any announcements before we adjourn?
Yes, so I believe, I can't remember who presented when, but Vera Institute of Justice finalized their Women in Jail report. They issued a press release and the findings are final. They are coming here to do a community event next Tuesday at 6 o'clock in this room. They want to hear from community people about how to operationalize the findings and recommendations where applicable. I think Lee touched a lot about the women population and the impact that we see, also tied in a lot with the report and substance use. So it's kind of a blend of what we're doing with opioid settlement as well. They're also coming, and UNC Mayheck Maternal Medicine will also be presenting about some of the work they do in terms of women who have been previously incarcerated or currently incarcerated that are pregnant or in early child rearing ages. So that is next week, Tuesday, this room. And well, I think Natalie sent it out in the email. Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a lot going on. I think our community safety violence prevention work is moving along. We're in constant conversation with the CASM technical assistance provider. We're hiring for the grant manager. We are also finalizing the RFP to get a community-based organization to apply. That'll be about 6 community health workers spread across probably those most impacted communities, and a program manager working in partnership with the county to operationalize that work. And so I will definitely send this information to Natalie. And the last thing, we're also gonna be recruiting for licensed clinicians in the department. One, to do work with the treatment courts and helping to get people into treatment faster by doing the initial assessments. And then JCPC provided funding to support the juveniles and us doing clinical assessments to relieve some of the burden from our community partners, so we could support the juveniles that are being referred, I should say the youth being referred to DJJ, to get them to treatment at the right place at the right time. So those are some of the things that we're moving to progressing along.
Good stuff, good stuff. Lots going on. Thanks for your leadership, Tiffany. Anything else?
I'll just note that as of yesterday, as part of the state's Medicaid reform process, we rolled out tailored care management across the system. And so that's introducing 25 new agencies for our region to provide care management for individuals. So that will greatly increase the access of the number of people that can get a care manager, help coordinate their medical, their behavioral health care, social determinants of health across the system to get that level of support. It will also introduce, I'll say temporarily, some confusion on how we, instead of having one organization do it, we're going to have 26 organizations providing some of that care. And so just want to make sure people are aware of that. And you may have organizations showing up at the jail that has an individual that's admitted that's going to want to get in there and be part of that discharge planning, making sure they're connected to services and treatment. All a good thing, but it's also going to introduce some other complications into that. So just be aware that we're working through that and trying to create some synergy there, but there's going to be some chaos for a few months.
All right, thank you, Donald. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Anybody opposed? Gonna stay long?
Right.
All right, thank y'all. Our next meeting is February, so we're gonna go into, this is our last meeting for the year. We're going to a new year. Lots of exciting stuff happening. We plan to have more.